Hello and welcome to another episode of the CG Garage. This is episode number 319, featuring Leighton and Paul from Technicolor Post. I have known Leighton and Paul for quite a while. We all worked together at a place called Sway, which is no longer around. But I learned a lot from both of them, as I was new to being a supervisor, and Leighton specifically was very good at teaching me the ins and outs of doing things, as she is an excellent producer. She is actually currently an executive producer over at Technicolor Post, and Paul is creative director there, and they've done some really cool work, which they get into. They've been doing stuff on Star Trek Picard, Westworld, Snowfall, and Bridgerton. So a bunch of other things that are going on there. Really interesting. Technicolor Post was actually recently acquired by Streamland Media, and we talk about that a little bit, as much as they could say, because it's still pretty fresh news and not all the details are sorted out. But it was really great to have them on, and I just was great catching up with them. It's like catching up with some old friends that you just happen to record and put on a podcast. Kristen is not joining me today because unfortunately she's busy, so I'm just doing this solo. So I'm going to go through all the announcements on my own. Hopefully you guys are okay with that. For all of these things can be found at chaos.com/events. And so the first one is on March 25th. There's going to be a real-time with Chaos Vantage webinar. So that's going to be available on March 25th. And on April 6th, there's going to be a free webinar on V-Ray 5 for Revit. For Revit. March 25th, a real-time with Chaos Vantage webinar, and April 6th, free webinar for V-Ray 5 for Revit. And those are at chaos.com/events. For product news, you can find all of this information at chaos.com. But basically we have, this may be old news to some of you guys, but Chaos Cosmos is out, and that has been added to V-Ray 5 for Revit, V-Ray 5 for Rhino, V-Ray 5 for 3ds Max with Update 1, and V-Ray 5 for SketchUp with Update 1. And Cosmos is our new asset library that you can use, and it's really great, so check it out. All of this, again, can be seen at chaos.com. If you want to know more about the podcast, you can go to facebook.com/CG Garage Podcast, or you can just go to chaos.com/CG Garage. If you have ideas for the podcast, we always welcome those. labs@chaosgroup.com is our email. Again, that's labs@chaosgroup.com is where you can email us. Ideas for guests are always welcome. We always love those, and we get some great suggestions, and we usually follow up on them. Remember also, you can leave us a review and a rating on Apple Podcast. That's always welcome as well. And if you want to check out the video forms of this podcast, you can do that on our Facebook page at the address I mentioned earlier, which is facebook.com/CG Garage Podcast, or on the Chaos TV channel on YouTube. All right, I think that's about it. I usually do this better with Kristen around, but I'm sorry, just doing it on my own today. Again, episode number 319, Leighton and Paul from Technicolor Post.
Welcome to another CG Garage, where the Chaos Group talks. You'll know it's over when the last bucket drops. We're gonna fire off rays in high dynamic range. We know that ambient occlusion is passé. Global illumination won't lead you astray. And while image-based lighting is really swell, you need to make sure everything has Fresnel.
It's going to be like we're catching up on old times, and then it's going to suddenly be like it's over and painless, and you won't even know that it happened.
I don't want it to be over. The rest of the day sucks.
I know, yeah. Well, let's do this. Let's just hang out for what we can. Yeah.
Right on.
Yeah. So that's cool. All right. So listen, there's got to be a lot of stuff. Obviously, the thing is, people need to know that all three of us work together in the trenches. And it was kind of interesting. We were all three of us in a position of leadership at a small company and dealing with some tough times, and doing some cool projects at the same time. It was a lot of fun, and I loved that feeling of camaraderie we got from that. And I learned so much from that position from both you, Leighton and Paul. So it was really cool. But that's where we all met, back at Sway, I think, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. And
The good old bad days.
Yeah, it was tough. It was tough. I mean, there was. I mean, we had some really good and interesting projects, and some really tough projects too. But we managed to deal with those in different ways. So, Leighton, you were the head of production back then at that company, and so you took care of everyone. Basically, that was the thing. If something went wrong, it's like Leighton took care of us, made sure that we were safe, we were healthy, we had the support that we needed. And you took care of everyone in the studio. And I remember that was like, I learned a lot from that process on how to respect people. That was a big thing that you did, was respecting people and making sure that they got what they needed. And Paul, you had already worked too. You had already worked at Sway before and then came back, right? That's
correct. Yeah. I first started as an artist, then went away, did some supervision, and then came back as a CG VFX supervisor.
Right. Right. And so you and I basically would split. We had different teams and we were taking on like different projects. And so it was like between Paul's team and Chris's team was really what we were working on together. And there was some interesting projects we worked on. That's really how we all met. But there's a story before all of that happened. And we're going to get a little bit into the backstories of how that, how we, that's the cross section. And now we're going to go to where the origin stories happen. So Leighton, what is your origin story? You've done a bunch of things in the entertainment industry, not just taking care of nerdy artists.
That's my main gig. I tend to be a caregiver just because I like it. I like caring for people because I care. But yeah, I came from a family that was always in entertainment, 2 actors for parents, but I did the whole college. I went to, Cal State Northridge, graduated with a communications degree. I was going to be like in marketing or publicity. And then I realized that meant selling things. I didn't really like to sell things. I like people. So I got very lucky. I started off at this company just kind of trying to find a way in entertainment because I always loved movies and make-believe and magic. So I started this little company called Pacific Ocean Post, which at the time I had no idea was very large. Like they were at the height of their sort of thing. And luckily I started as reception and what they called a concierge. And just my I gravitated towards the people in visual effects. They were funny. They made jokes. They were quirky. I don't know, but I just fell in with them. And when they had a position for a coordinator, I said, I don't know what kind of, thing you would need, but maybe. And they're like, oh, we've already asked. You're going to get transferred. I'm like, oh, great. So then my career just kind of started. And by working closely with artists and building trust and respect and learning so much, everything from back then, what a D1 was. Nobody knows what that is now. It's a doorstop.
Yeah.
To, color space and how things work, the boxes. Back then there was Henry and Hal.
Oh my gosh. Okay. You're really dating yourself.
Yes. I am. Don't I look good?
Henry. Yeah. Wow.
But yeah, you know what I mean? So it was an evolution and I was blown away. But over the course of time, we worked from there. My next job through, again, Artists in Connection was at Rhythm and Hues, more learning. And from there, then, smaller shops like A52, Sway, Zoic, Entity. But it was always this amazing journey of being taught and learning at every single space that I was in. And it was really, I got that opportunity from all the great people that we work with,
Yeah.
So I just feel blessed. And so eventually, over time, then you start moving up the food chain, and that's head of production. I went from Zoic, senior producer, to head of production at Sway. And then cut to a few years later, Paul and I now work at Technicolor VFX.
Yeah.
I as EP and he is creative director. So
there you go.
The journey continues.
There you go. Yeah. Awesome. Now, Paul, let's hear a little bit about your backstory, how you ended up in this thing. I've always known you as like a star, like one of those you were part of the Lightwave cult group that was really big at the time and sort of came out of that era. And, which was, by the way, I don't mean to say cult because it was not really a cult, but it was definitely a certain group. And I would have discussions with you like, okay, how do you do that in Lightwave? And you were the person who could help me figure those things out.
Actually, and I had a late start. I feel like a late start to the entertainment biz. I came into it, like a decade after I graduated high school. And that decade before that was filled with managing customer service and IT departments, as well as getting into database programming and developing. And yeah, and being a big art buff and creating props on the side and stuff, a friend of mine who's working on Babylon 5 basically said, "Hey, we use this software to make things, for TV and film. It's computers and how to build things. You want to give it a shot?" And yeah, the rest is history. I think about 3 months later, after like some serious hands-on, some training from some friends, I cut my teeth getting a job as a junior lightwave artist, and that was, I don't know, 22, 23 years ago, whatever it was. But and at first it was just that. It was like, okay, there's Lightwave, it's used for TV. Max, 3D Studio Max was games, and this Maya software is only for features. And I figured I got to start learning some of these things. Fast forward 10 years, at that point I think I was using Maya, XSI, and Max. And trying to understand the differences and teach the differences and use the benefits of everything. And then a couple of years later too, I was.
But that's a good thing, Paul. I'm sorry. I just wanted. That's a good thing you learn all three, because that really makes you sort of agnostic to the software. It more makes you realize, like, yes. If I can drive a Ford, I can drive a Chevy. You know what I mean? Like, it's the same. It's a car is a car.
Yeah, and honestly. Honest to God, when it comes down to it, it's never about the application. I mean, sure, there are some major differences, but it's truly about the artist. I mean, I knew extraordinary artists that were so headstrong and set in their ways that they wouldn't upgrade, to the latest version, and they might be using a version of something that was 4 years old. And it was like, oh, there's so many new bells and whistles, on this new version. They're like, don't need it. And what they used was, or what they made with it was just extraordinary, so it's like, okay, it is about the artist. But then, I think when Max, I think it was when V-Ray came out for like 3D Studio Max, all of a sudden, in my opinion, that was a huge game changer. And then people are like, oh, wow, you can do that in Max? Okay. And then, other... whether it was thinking particles or some other things, and all of a sudden, like, Max started, I feel like, taking over, some of the territory that Maya had won. But truly, it was about the artistry, and learning the application. It was like, okay, if you know how to speak English, then you could probably learn Latin. You could probably learn a Latin-based language at that point. It's like, it's all the same thing. It's just slightly conjugated slightly differently. Right.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's a great way of putting it. I mean, that, you can do a little bit of both, but it was great. I mean, obviously I learned a lot, like I said, from you. Like, I remember you showing me specifically F prime, which was something cool. Like, it's like, that's something that, Chaos Group needs something like this. And we call it V-Ray GPU now, but that's pretty much what F prime was at the time. So it was interesting.
Yeah. Before everybody else. Yeah.
Yeah. I do want to say one thing. I mean, my listener, like you guys know, this podcast has been around for 6 years and over 300 episodes. And so some of my loyal listeners have heard me tell a few stories over and over again. And one of the stories that I say often is about my favorite part of visual effects tends to be the bidding process sometimes. And the reason being is that the reason I say is, like, that's the process where they give you, a task and a bid and a number to do that task, and those things never match. And so your job is to talk them out of it by either having them change their mind about what they can do or change their budget. And that relationship, you start that relationship, and often because you do that, that is something that you can, you don't just sort of go, okay, we'll do this for that. It's, if you start that relationship and that conversation, you actually start a relationship with the person before you even won the bid. And that's the really big thing. Now, that particular skill, I've said that story many, many times. That skill is what I learned from Leighton. So she is the person who taught me that skill. I don't know if you guys know that, but I have sat with Leighton many, many times doing bids on projects. And she was like, they want to do like some fireball with 10,000 cars coming out of it, and they've got $400, right? And I was like, okay, how are we going to do this? Let's figure this out. And then, when you actually get with the actual person and you talk to them, they'll actually sometimes do something different. They'll tell you, oh, well, that's not what I intended. And when you have that relationship, you've already started a relationship before you've even finished a bid. So that's been a great thing. Yeah.
We feel very strongly about that. Paul and I always talk about it too, especially the way visual effects came around in our industry. At first it was so like, you don't even know that you need us, so let us teach you that you need us.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it was always, we come from that point of view as being sort of an afterthought, or like, we'll get them involved later. We don't need them right now. And we're almost evangelical about like, no, you need us now, because if you can talk to us now, we will save you money. We will be your partners and make it better. Yeah. And if you can get them engaged in that conversation, without a doubt, it turns out that way. I mean, certain things, push comes to shove, there are things that if you really want 10,000 cars coming out of a real fireball, that's going to be tough.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, if you can push and pull a little and get that going, it's so crucial. And I'm glad that that's one of the things you took away, because I think that we agree it's so essential.
Yeah,
and
honestly speaking, it is sometimes your only chance to have a creative input.
Yes, absolutely.
And so I think that's a really important thing for people to realize. Like the bidding process sounds like, okay, you got to sit down and come up with a bunch of numbers of how much it's going to cost to do something. It doesn't sound very exciting, but if you really put your mind to it, you can do some exciting things at that point. You can change people's opinions, you can adjust things, you can have some input. So it's really kind of nice to do that.
You can, to that point, it's like, you can really work with the methodology and try to understand, okay, is this a scripted moment that they absolutely need to see? Do they need to see that fireball, or can it be alluded to? And it's like, especially if the production is budget challenged, then it's like, let's figure out a different way to tell that story. Hit that story point. And I think the evangelical part that Leighton was mentioning too, it's in my personal opinion, calling VFX post is actually like wasting a huge opportunity to trim a budget and to collaborate with the storytellers, with the writers, the producers, because when it's in script form is when VFX should be used just like special effects, just like the stunt team, the actors, like everybody, even lighting. It's like everybody, including VFX, should be coming together at that point and saying, this is what we're bringing to the table. This is how we can collaborate and solve your creative or collaborate and try to figure out the best way to shoot something for the buck, or to make it more safe, or to
tell the story further, to even to just
absolutely.
help the creative product be better.
Absolutely.
VFX those are not just for post anymore.
Yeah, no, it's true, and it's also your opportunity to start your relationship with your customer, right? And that if you can start the relationship with your customer before you won the bid, you may actually win the bid early because they like who you are, as opposed to someone with the lowest price. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's like, this person has lots of great ideas. I don't care if they're, 10% more expensive. Let's use them because I already trust them, exactly. And those are great. And customer relationships was something also I learned a lot from both of you guys. There are certain things. I remember actually when Leighton and I worked at Method together as well. When we were there, and I remember the Scion projects we worked on together. Do you remember those?
Oh, yeah, those were fun. Yeah.
Those were a lot of fun, and we had, we were told. I think we had a very difficult director, and everyone's like, they were tiptoeing around him. It was like, no, I think Simon was his name. I said, what is his name?
Yeah, I was going to say they kind of likened him to Simon on American Idol.
Yes,
because they were like, he's tough, he's British, he's great looking, he's very put together, but he's tough.
Yeah. And everyone was like, very like tiptoes around him, and then I was like, okay, all right. And we developed such a strong relationship with him that by the end, Leighton, you said you like hanging out with the nerdy artists, right? They were like, he's a clean freak. He's very clean. He's like, nope. He was hanging out in the artist bay with us, sitting on our dirty couch, watching dailies with us, just like hanging out with the guys. And he was like, this is great. This is so much fun. Like, I feel like I'm part of the team. And it really was, because we developed that relationship with him and we nurtured it over time. And it just, one commercial, we did 6 commercials with him all in a row. It was like pretty awesome. Pretty cool stuff. So thanks for those lessons, honestly speaking, those lessons that I learned in my life. And they're not just for visual effects, they're for everything that you do and for business or for how you talk to customers and how you do everything. So both of you guys were really good at teaching me those lessons, for sure.
Thank you.
Okay, so I do want to go through a little bit about what you guys are doing at Technicolor. So what's going on there? Like you said, you guys are kind of working as a team again, right?
Yep. Paul's the creative director, but and I'm the executive producer. But it started about 3 years ago with a bit of a change in perspective for Technicolor Post specifically, because as many people know, Technicolor is a big company and has bought plenty of other creative companies like The Mill, MPC, Mr. X.
Right.
So it's not that they don't have a visual effects offering, because I have to say, when Paul, he got there before I did, and he reached out to me, I had worked at the Mill recently, and I was like, why? What are you doing? Why do we need, who's Technicolor Post? Why do you need this?
Right.
So I will let Paul tell the story of what changed.
Yeah. Okay. So that is a good point. Technicolor is a huge company and you're part of it, but in a very specific place. So tell us a little bit about Technicolor Post.
So Technicolor Post has been around for a long time, and it itself has acquired a few aspects from sound, visual effects, duplication, finishing, you name it, color, and about 3 years ago, a little over 3 years ago, they made the decision to take the handful of visual effects artists that they had in house. Try to unify them over the 3 offices, London, Toronto, and LA. Get them all under one pipe and do more than just like the last minute sort of production fixes and the fix it in posts type of stuff.
Right. So we're talking mostly like some flame work. Oh, there's a wire that needs removal or some little stuff like that.
They were very heavy flame.
Yeah.
Because what they were experiencing, or the need that they were filling by having in-house visual effects artists, was really for their their colorists who are finishing in DI and finishing a lot of episodic work. So Technicolor at that point, they may have done the sound, they may have done the dailies, they may be doing the color and the edit. And then they're like, and then we're watching all of our clients go to somewhere else to do visual effects. Sure, we do paint out a C-stand, we do beauty work, we do de-aging, we do all this kind of work. But what if we said, hey, you don't have to leave the building. We do it all here. We can do your set extensions. We can do, a good amount of your CG, especially hard surface stuff. We're not so big on character stuff yet, but an area we're growing in. We can do your dynamics, and all of these things. So Paul was really essential in making that turn and bringing him in, someone like him with his experience of working with much bigger, higher end CG, higher end product for visual effects, and trying to retool the team that we had and expand greatly the team that we had to make that offering to our clients, really.
That's interesting. That's not uncommon that big color companies, like my wife works at Photochem, so you guys are familiar with that. Yeah. So big color companies are like, okay, we're doing the color, and it's like, oh crap, we see something, quick, fix it. Right? Like that happens all the time, right? And she does a lot, and she's like, I'm working at a deli. It's like, I got a line cleanup, ding, and then she'll like fix it and hand it back, right? So she does that a lot. She does work on these like minute by the minute billing scenarios that she does, but there is also bigger projects that she does, but that she takes over all by herself, which is great. So it sounds to me like you guys are doing that. It's like, and we're going to start to do set extensions. Like what are some of the things like you started to offer that are different, Paul?
Virtually everything.
Okay.
In the past 2 years, 2.5 years or so that I've been there, we grew from 12, 14 people in the team to over 60, and went from heavy flame to Nuke and Maya, and and we've kind of done it all with the exception of heavy creature work. But yeah, and I wouldn't say in the past year, but the last 2 years, because 2020 was a whole lot less fruit bearing than we really wanted it to.
Right.
But we on Westworld we did head replacements. Full CG head replacements for Ed Harris's character. On Picard, we did massive set extensions and set replacements, like full digital set replacements, matte paintings, dynamics work, smoke, fire, blowing things up, breaking things.
Right.
And so it's like everything under the sun. Right now we've got a show in house, Snowfall. It's in its fourth season, and it's a period show, which it's set in the 1980s in Los Angeles, and we end up having to do a bunch of paint out work, but we're also doing like reconstructing downtown LA so that it looks like 1980s, the 1980s skyline, removing a lot of satellite dishes.
Yep.
But, cell towers.
Yeah. And because it's all about the rise of crack cocaine in LA in the 80s, there's a lot of squib hits, a lot of muzzle flashes.
Right.
But there's also
we've done a lot of period work,
explosions and stuff. But yeah,
Bridgerton.
Yeah. On top of that, it's like exactly. It's this past year we've done Bridgerton, a huge smash hit on Netflix. Yesterday, Firefly Lane just came out, which has a bunch more of our work in it. We did a complete set replacement on that, and so it's like almost everything under the sun, really, that we're doing, and it's. And still to date, even though it's been a couple of years, we have clients that come up to us and go like, "Oh, you guys do that?" And it's like, yeah, we're the best kept secret,
Right.
And really try to get it out there and just show people what we can do.
I mean, that is really cool because it is, the thing right now, the world is not short of content that's being generated. I mean, there is so much stuff happening. I think Netflix say they're releasing at least one new movie every week. And that does not include all the series that are coming out and all of that stuff. So there's a ton of content, and people are definitely consuming content, especially during the pandemic. It's been like a consumption of content that you just absorb, which is, and that's the number of content. But even Paul and Leighton, and when we were all working together, TV was not necessarily like high-end visual effects back then as much as it is now. I mean, now it's like it rivals and some often surpasses what used to be done on film in a lot of ways.
Well, and it's technically a bigger market these days.
Oh, yeah.
Because we've all seen the tent poles have seriously decreased. And now, too, with movie theaters being closed for the last year, there's serious contention about if and when and to what extent they'll survive, to really have mass viewing again. Because I know Netflix has rejiggered their whole plan, too, about, people now are very used to getting a movie same day in their home. I would bet I'm sure there's studies about how electronics purchases have gone up because people are home. That is their entertainment.
Right.
So they've rejiggered to say, okay, we're going to really invest more in films. Here's our first slot, which is, 5 million and under, and this many films. And then we're going to invest in these many films that are the big end, and they're 10 to 20.
Right.
Not 100 million, not 75.
Yeah.
So that market has gotten huge, where everybody is come to the watering hole of episodic, really,
Right.
content-based, small series, whatever you want to call it. But that's really where we've seen, especially recently, our partners have been MPC, Mr. X, and, they very much want into that market because it's such a vibrant market right now.
Absolutely. I honestly speaking, as a consumer, I'm going to be happy because I'm getting whatever I want in any kind of form I want, right? And I can subscribe to, I can subscribe to Criterion Channel right now, right? And I have that and that is content that I have at my fingertips that would be hard to get normally, right? And I can watch it anytime I want. And those are things that are great. So I'm watching a whole lot of 70s films that, I probably forgot about. And I was like, oh, I can't wait to see that again, And those are really great things. And I think that's a wonderful thing as a consumer to do that. By the way, I don't know, you guys are probably experiencing the same thing, but there's there's a lot of restoration work that's being done in big companies, right? Are you guys doing some of that as well?
Yep.
Yes, we have a whole restoration department, as a matter of fact, who had already been busy, but they are experiencing more of that jump too. So
yeah, especially when TVs are going 4K
fun.
and HDR and everything else, they gotta.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So it's nice to restore some of those when you do come across the classic ones, it's very nice to be a part of keeping that alive.
Oh yeah.
And making it viewable for future generations.
I know.
It's a nice perk.
I know. Karen had to do some of that too, and I think she came up to me. She's like, "I'm so excited." I was like, "What's going on?" I was like, "I get to work on Evil Dead." And she goes, "It's so cool." And I was like, "Anyway, it's a lot of fun to do those things." And so these are. I think, honestly speaking, as a consumer, as I said, it's great to do that. It's really cool that you guys are doing that in house as well, because I think that sort of is a shortcut. It's like we need this, and we can just get it done right here, and don't have to worry about bidding it out to a bunch of places. But I'm sure you still have to bid things, right? These guys are still doing the bidding.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, very much so. It is still a very competitive market, and that's the thing, as we all know, because someone will do it for the price. You know what I mean? To what extent they care about, again, the relationship and the quality and the convenience, too. Production has a choice, you know what I mean? Whether they fly with us or not, so it is, there's also that aspect to bidding as well. When we were talking earlier about, it's the psychological benefits too. It's the price, but how you also package that into value add of who you are and what you offer as those people in that package. You know what I mean? A full team that yep, you can call us anytime. We're not going to, charge you every minute for, advice or going to set, for a piecemeal day or those kind of things, because it's very competitive.
Yeah. It is a competitive market. There's a lot of visual effects companies out there, and I'm sure right now, especially, they're all looking for work. Do you find yourself competing a lot more overseas, as people used to say, do that? Because obviously, LA work has been something that was always been a thing. One of the reasons I left visual effects is I didn't want to move to Vancouver. But do you guys find yourself still competing in those areas?
Our northern neighbor is still very competitive.
Oh, yes. Right. But you guys have something in Toronto, right? So
we have Toronto.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
And I don't know how aware, but we're also in the process. Technicolor Post is in the process of being acquired by Streamland Media,
right?
Which is Picture Shop, Formosa. And they don't have a Toronto location, but they have a Vancouver location.
Right.
With their Ghost Effects is their visual effects brand.
Okay.
So we're excited that, again, it's like, okay, add another piece to the puzzle, add another something that, we can then provide these multi-mix and match sort of packages to our clientele to look, it's the best of all worlds. Everybody's getting to do the work. We get to stay very high quality, but you get your tax incentives, and then we all get to share great looking work, hopefully, is the goal.
Yes. Now, I know this news on the acquisition is probably very fresh, and there's not limited stuff you can probably say about it, which is completely understandable. But I'm going to ask some questions anyway, and you can answer what you can tell me what you can answer and what I answer. So
tell you what we know,
or that Yeah, I know. Sometimes you don't even know yourself.
I think that's the issue right
it's
there.
Fresh.
So, what's the name of the company that's acquiring you guys again?
Streamland Media.
And they own Picture Shop, Ghost,
Formosa Sound.
Okay. And they're
Finale and The Farm.
And we've been actually, as a company, we've been looking at them because we've been noticing how quickly they are growing and how much they're acquiring. They're being very interesting, and that's a company that's going to be very interesting. And the fact that they acquired you is very interesting, and I actually think it could be it's a very positive thing for you guys.
We do too.
Yeah,
we do too. Yeah, absolutely.
So now that they've acquired you, now did they acquire you just for your visual effects stuff, or are they doing the color as well, like all of that?
It is considered Technicolor Post, so that would include dailies, color, the editorial that we offer, sound, and visual effects. Did I miss anything, Paul?
On set, dailies.
Oh, right.
Yes, I said dailies, but yes, on set dailies.
Okay. Yeah. That is a lot. That's a big business move.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Do you know?
But I think this is just an opinion. This is not anything that is, said by anybody else.
Right.
But in the markets that we compete in, most often our competition has been picture shop, as far as in that episodic world. So looking at it that way and trying to, garner as much clientele, obviously investment in talent to garner that clientele seems logical enough, a reason why they would be expanding and adding us to that mix, Right.
But Picture Shop is also a fairly new company as well.
Yes.
So
it is,
So they I mean, this could be like, oh, this is an easy way for us to grow that company in a little bit more, right?
Hands down.
Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Because I think Mitch Gates is at Picture Shop, I think. So I don't know if you guys know Mitch, but...
Well, Bill Romeo started it from Encore.
Yes.
And I think he is, sort of he's the head of the whole thing, with this backing and investor group that has been then now looking to further acquire.
Right.
So.
Right. Well, that's great. I'm really excited. I think Picture Shop is a very cool company. I've been following them. Like I said, I know a couple of great people that work there, and they are very hot in the streaming SVOD world, shall we say? So, yeah. So that's really. Then I think there's some really great work coming out of there as well. So I do wonder. So, like we mentioned, there's got some new original content. There's especially the other thing that I also find interesting about the streaming content is that it's, as opposed to you're working on another Marvel film, superhero film, and it's always the same kind of thing. The massive differences between styles, directors, every show you work on can be completely different look, feel, et cetera, et cetera. Do you feel that is the case, or do you see a lot of trends that are happening between different shows that you are taking advantage of?
I think, generally speaking, there's a huge difference between genres for one thing, but just director and artistry style. A director I worked with recently, literally said, I like to kind of allude to an effect. I don't feel like I necessarily have to show it on screen all the time. Right. Whereas, whether it's Marvel or any other like blockbuster, production, it's like, no, effects are part of kind of like that genre. It's like you want to show them, you want to see the things that are happening, and I really think it kind of boils down to, just the director or that specific artist's taste, and what they want to show. Some people don't necessarily want to show grotesque violence, whereas others are like, nah, come on, let's make this Kill Bill Volume 5, right? It really it does boil down to different productions, and Leighton can tell you too. It's like we've been working on everything from indie, augmented reality to like Netflix docs, to Marvel content, kind of a thing, Marvel and Disney content, right? And so it's all over the place, and it's refreshing because it's not just the same sort of cookie cutter approach to doing visual effects, and for our part, sometimes, it's just that it's like, oh yeah, no, we can approach it like this, or we can offer this, and if you don't like that, we can try this, and it's nice to be able to mix it up and not just feel like you've got that widget that you want to stamp out constantly.
Right.
Yeah. I think it falls more in genre, like you were saying, because nowadays they've realized there's so many different types of flavors for people. So it really falls in everything from, like, oh, you're in the magic world, you're in the tech world, you're in the space world, you're in the Western world, you're in the, you know what I mean?
Yep.
And it's kind of nice because we do get a nice cross section of those things, all the way to like, oh, this is a 3-camera comedy. And you're like,
Right.
oh, okay. Then you have to school back to what that is, and just how simple, in certain ways that can be, so it's kind of nice. You get a real round robin, so to speak, of all the flavors.
Yeah, that's really interesting. What is the thing that's interesting about that is also is when I started working in commercials, I worked in features, and then I worked in commercials, and then I went back to features. But the thing about features is like you could be on a feature for a year, right, or longer, and sometimes it's not a good film, right? And you get like, and then there's like, here's a year of my life. I mean, I worked on 47 Ronin, which is a film that not many people saw, and luckily I've only was on it for about 4 or 5 months. But there was a guy who was on it who was the original supervisor, and he had been working on that film for about 3.5 years trying to get it done. I'm like, imagine that amount of time, and you don't have the opportunity to do other things. So to me, it also sounds like streaming stuff or streaming content is you go through a lot. Like you can, it's almost at the scale or speed of commercial stuff, isn't it?
Very much so, yeah.
It's kind of an in-between, and just having done, because I've done commercial, episodic, or streaming, and features, and that's the interesting thing, because I would, like you, I bounced back and forth a few times between features and commercials, because the timing, sometimes you're like, oh my God, this is going on forever, nobody will let anything go, and then with commercials, you're like, we are racing towards a brick wall, and it is going to end at some point, because we got to be done, right? So that's kind of a good thing. And then episodics is this nice in-between, I find. It's a really good marriage schedule wise sometimes. I mean, it has its own things like everything, but between that sort of, it's got to be done quickly and efficiently and look good. And there's a point where it's got to go. You know what I mean? You've got to let it go. It's got a date. It's going to go. Yep. And it kind of allows you to have a little bit more control in a way, and so when you burn, because we all know as visual effects artists, we burn, it's not as intense maybe, or it happens quicker, and then it's like, okay, now the next one's maybe not so intense. So I kind of like the rhythm of it a little bit more, speaking just from the schedule, vibe. And it's interesting to see as artists come in, how they then assimilate, depending on what their experience is, to that time frame.
Right. Right. But
the demands.
But the quality level of streaming is also really, really high, so it's like, you got to do that. Yeah. And TVs aren't forgiving anymore. These are 4K HDR TVs. This is not, this is more detail going in than when, I worked on Day After Tomorrow, which was, 2K and film, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. That, and I feel that the viewer's eyes have been, more educated over the past decade as well. It's like every viewer out there expects better, not just that their TV is providing a 4K image, in HDR, it's just that I think everyone's eyes are they're just maturing to the point where like, oh, that doesn't look good, So, and that's...
Well, we used to talk about that all the time, actually. And I think that's something I very much learned from you, Chris.
What was that?
To take a quick side turn. The real importance of lighting is like, because I've never said, like, I didn't come up with a degree in any sort of art or creativity, but the average person will look at it, because we were doing CG cars heavily.
Oh, yeah.
And at that time, they were relatively new to have fully photoreal CG cars. Yep. But your thing was always like, the average person will look at it and they'll know something is wrong. They won't know what, but they'll know something is wrong.
Right.
You know what I mean? And it was usually to do with the lighting and then the composite of the lighting.
Right.
But it was really, I learned a lot from you both that way of like trusting the fact that after a while, my eyes were, like the average consumer, but maybe a little bit more enhanced.
Right.
And I maybe couldn't always articulate it, but, like you say, the average consumer nowadays they don't know what's wrong, but they know it's wrong. It's wrong for half the time, if it doesn't look right.
Well, that's the thing, right? So a car, you can very much use it for a human face in my whole uncanny valley argument, but a car specifically falls in the same thing. You know what a car looks like because you see so many of them every day. And if it doesn't quite look right because the lighting's not right or the shader's got too much reflection or the Fresnel's not right, you're like, that doesn't look like a car. And I don't know why, but it's, and that's the thing. It's like, I don't know what's wrong, but it's wrong.
Yes.
It's true.
Very true. Yep.
But people are more savvy, I think. So now they know more, they look at it and they're like, yeah, something's up.
Yeah. And I think some of the problems sometimes, especially and this is a danger that Paul, I'm sure you can understand that. It's like some of the problems is some people, when a visual effects person or a CG person knows too much, that's when they get into danger because then they don't actually look at it they look at the minutia and not the big picture.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And it's funny because actually something that I recall learning at Sway, and this was working with you, Chris, as well as, using the Drivatron.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And, realizing that just because we are matching reality as close to humanly as possible isn't necessarily correct. Because
it's not what they
the
want
client
sometimes.
wants.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like, oh yeah,
a little idealization is good, especially in advertising.
Try to make a minivan do a power slide.
Right.
That's not going to happen.
Yeah.
We can do it. Yeah. They're like, yes, no, it needs to do a power slide. We're like, it's going to lean into the weight of the body of the roll, the suspension, the tires are going to, they're like, no, it needs to slide. You're like,
yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, just give people a little more context. So when we all worked at Sway, as we mentioned earlier, but Sway was a VFX company that specialized in car work and specifically car commercials, which was very lucrative at the time as a business. And we had one of our secret sauces is we had a piece of software called Drivatron, which was written by Graham Fife. I'm still in touch with Graham and Daniel. They both work at Apple, by the way, these days. But Graham wrote Drivatron. And Drivatron was a car simulator. It was absolutely fantastic. It was the most realistic car simulator out there. And basically what would happen is these CG cars, we would drive them like with a steering wheel. We had a remote steering wheel. Oh, yeah. He wrote a video game like a car, and it would simulate the car like a motion capture stage and would have the right balance and the tire smashing, like in terms of the compression of the tires, how much skid it would have when it would lose traction. All of that would be recorded, and then you'd be able to do these beautiful renders of these cars, and they looked absolutely realistic because the motion was right. Just as Leighton said, I know if it's true physics, it's going to look right? The problem was people would say, I want to have a power slide on a minivan or something crazy like that, and that's impossible. And I remember Graham was like, Graham, you got to drive it this way. And he goes, that's impossible. And then he would say, well, I kind of got it. I put super glue on the tires so that they would not keep traction. And I think I might have hit 5G, so I'm definitely dead in the car as a driver. Yeah.
That was a pretty good Graham impersonation.
Yeah. So I'm definitely dead. Yeah.
Very
and
good.
but those were the requests, right? And so it's like, okay, yeah. And what's interesting about that, Paul, is sorry, you got me into this thing. The first thing about that is that how is it done in real life, right? If you do it in real life, the way that Michael Bay will shoot an action car sequence, right, is very different than you think it is. Most of the time, those cars, when it looks like they're speeding down the freeway and it's got a close-up camera on a wheel moving, that car's going like 15 miles an hour. It's not going 150. It's just not possible, right? It doesn't look fast at 80 miles an hour. It looks fast when you can feel the road and see the road. Mm-hmm. And so it's very different to do that. And I think that's what people get confused a little bit. It's like, oh no, I think this is what it should look like. Well, that's what it feels like, but that's the camera that's doing the work, not the car.
Yeah.
Too true.
Like, how do you know you're going that fast? It's what you're going past. That's the motion, not actually. That's how you tell visually what you're doing, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah,
it may not need to be filmed that way to feel that way.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, lots of tricks. My favorite was driving on the moon, though. I have to just have a shout out for driving on the moon.
Right. I
Yes,
forgot
The
that.
that's
simulator
right.
on
Yeah.
the moon was the best.
Yes.
It's like, big four-wheeling.
Yeah. Yeah. It was because you could change the gravity. And then we asked Graham, it's like, because driving on the moon was a lot of fun, and we asked him to have dust particles behind it. And he's like, he'll do something quickly. And it didn't look right at all, but we kept it because it looked like you were being chased by bees. It was a lot of fun.
Fun with tech.
It was
Right.
fun.
That's good.
And the other cool thing about that thing is, do you remember the what was it? The Pontiac commercial we did? You were part of the Pontiac commercial.
Oh yeah.
We had the clients were hanging out, and they got to drive the cars while we were working on things. So while they were waiting for reviews, they would play and like drive the cars around. So that was kind of a bonus of the project. Yeah, it was a great project. It was a lot of fun. There was something else I learned from you, Leighton, and Paul as well, because we would share war stories on it, was being on set and what it's like to be on set.
Oh yeah.
And there are some interesting things about being on set. So where did you cut your teeth on the ethics and the priorities, and how do you deal with people and on the whole being on set thing? Where was that coming from?
For I think my first on set gigs were actually doing a little bit of prop work and special effects. Actually, just before getting into visual effects, and so I kind of learned a little bit about, don't stand behind the director, and always talk to the first AD, and and oddly enough, I'm still learning things to date. Good, God knows how many years later. But my first visual effects gig on set was through the Syndicate for a Six Flags commercial, if I'm not mistaken. And yeah, we had it was supposed to be 2 or 3 commercials where these roller coasters like smash out of the ground and tear houses apart, like coming to life, just essentially like populating an entire like neighborhood into a Six Flags park. And it was meant to be like scary and horrific. And the first one came out and it was truly incredible, and then the second one never made it to air because there was a death at one of the parks, unfortunately.
Oh, boy.
And so they just kind of canned the whole that whole commercial scheme. But yeah, I remember going to set and, wide-eyed and going like, okay, I have to photograph all this. I have to get all this reference information. I have to talk to the people who don't know or care who I am. But we're a large part of making this commercial come to reality. And I have to say that a lot of my experience, going way back to like customer service, talking to people, understanding what they're doing and what I need to do, and trying to find a happy medium, and then collaborating. A lot of those skills, so much bigger and more important than exactly knowing, okay, if I hold down the white balance button on the camera, I'm going to get everything I need, as compared to now I have to white balance all my photos after the fact. But
Doesn't sound like that ever happened.
no, never last week. I mean, yeah. But it's just that it's being on set is you're always in the way, no matter who you are, and it's this like dance of trying to figure out, when can I get in to get what I need. How can I work with everybody else? Don't step on anyone else's toes. Make sure you're making friends, because all these people will probably be finding you a job. If they like you and like working with you and like the product, they'll probably end up working with you again, or finding new work, kind of a thing. And so it's, I mean, from that day one, it was just like showing up at a brand new school, being the odd kid out, and then having,
be nice.
and then having to make the best of it. So
Yeah. Yeah. That lesson you learn very quickly. The first person you want to be friends with is the AD. If you're not friends with the AD, you ain't gonna get what you want.
Yes. Yeah. Too true.
Yeah.
You cannot be a problem. You need to be a solver.
Yeah. It was those are interesting times. You learn a lot from that process of being on set. And Leighton was there with me when I was learning the props. I mean, honestly speaking, I came in with a lot of knowledge and a lot of gusto and a lot of feelings, but I was still green in a lot of areas. And if it wasn't for people like Leighton that were like, here's how you deal with a bid, because I never bid on anything. I was always the guy who would come out with ideas. Like, I was like, oh crap, I was like, I know what I got to do, but it was hard. Or here's how you do that. And now we're going to go on set, and I didn't know what an AD was when I first went on set at Sway. I had no idea. I mean, I did, but I didn't know what that implied, if it wasn't for those things. So, that's where I learned those things. And it was really great lessons. And I really appreciate that, and to take those things, which has been, it's been fun. It's been a lot of fun. But how are you guys dealing? I mean, we're coming close to the end, but how are you guys dealing? Obviously, whole new adventures coming ahead of you. There's a lot of unknowns with happening, but how has you been doing? You said you've been doing some work during the pandemic, but it's been a little bit of a challenge, right?
Yep.
We were very, very fortunate. Sometimes, as you know, in visual effects, the whole industry has its ups and downs of like consolidation, and then smaller shops, like bigger shops buy all the small shops, but then they get so big, they kind of burst, and then there's smaller shops. So this was a case, I think, where being one of the bigger shops kind of definitely helped, because the need that happened immediately for working remotely was able to be addressed very quickly by a large group of people. You know what I mean? We already had
part of a bigger
working,
infrastructure.
So,
yeah,
exactly. So I think that is definitely a plus. We have some extraordinary people. We're very lucky. We have a great team, but that allowed us to go remotely quickly. I think it was really only a week of some trial and error before it was a pretty smooth process. So we got very fortunate. And, the good, bad thing is we're all in it together. Even our clients, they were just grateful that we could make the transition, and that it became, the nice thing about visual effects, unlike a color bay, especially in the episodic world, clients don't usually want to come in and sit with you and watch it happen. They're like, you just show me the finals, show me work in progress, show me the finals, So they were already used to the remote viewing process. So I think that helped mentally, like it wasn't a hurdle for them of like, okay, how am I going to evaluate this?
Got it.
So, but I think Paul can speak, more to the intricacies of how that worked, making sure artists were set up at home, that they could communicate effectively and efficiently back and forth, with the pipeline. But we luckily didn't really miss a beat, and very fortunately already had shows in the pipeline that were coming to us that, because you can only get fed what has already been shot as in post-production, already to a degree. So we've been very lucky that during these lean times, we've had things that were already in the pipe, So I think we're really happy. And that's going to be the shock when we have to go back. It's going to be like, what do you mean I have to get up and shower and
I don't know. I don't know if I want to go back. I was like, maybe.
I'm with you. I think a lot of us are with you.
Yeah, maybe once a week. Maybe. Yeah. Just to stretch my legs.
Exactly. See each other, say hi. With masks probably still, but I think there is a new normal coming of a mix that, I truly hope we don't lose the good things that happened with us needing to stay home, of like, hey, I think most people have a little bit better quality of life, certainly with their family and, spending time in their home. Most of us, in LA commute. And so it's like, oh my God, I just got 2 hours of my life back every day. That's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other thing, I was going to mention also is that we were told we couldn't work from home because of security issues. Well, now everyone was forced to work from home. Suddenly those security issues you can't argue them anymore. So you can work from home. And if you want to continue to work from home, there's no reason for you, if it makes your life better, I don't see any reason why you should be forced to do that. Now, it would be nice to get together every now and then to be a little more efficient in certain areas, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to, right? I think that's the thing.
Yeah.
And I think actually you said the word efficient, and that's, in my opinion, that's probably the big buzzword for, all the powers that be, way above us.
Right.
Everybody wants to be as efficient. They want all their employees to be as efficient as possible. And there are some inefficiencies when it comes down to working from home. And being able to just turn your head and talk to the artist next to you is an amazing efficiency that everybody takes for granted. Even supervising, being able to get up and walk down the hall and talk to a group of artists or the editor or whoever.
Training.
Yeah.
That happens.
Exactly. It's like being able to make certain that everyone is available to do a Zoom call or a Teams call, and then schedule it and then make it happen, and not everybody has the best internet, connection either.
Yeah.
And most everybody can work fine, with essentially, microseconds, milliseconds worth of delay, which is just simply amazing. But then there are times that, there might be a lag spike and they can't work for, minutes or even hours. So yeah, there are pros and cons to it all. I certainly hope we can all work from home and continue to. And then when we do have those 911 projects, then it's let's circle the wagons. Let's bring everybody back in the office.
Right.
Yeah.
Bang it out. Let's get it done.
Yeah, I can't imagine when you have big projects. I mean, we all know, we've all been there, where you're every second you're where's that shot? Where's that shot? When is it going to be done? When's the render? Yeah. So the immediacy of being able to go room to room with a supervisor and look at whatever's done right when it's done, so that you can get those notes and keep going. Those kind of moments, I'm that would be harder at home. Yeah. But again, I'm with y'all. Let's find a mix.
Yeah. I certainly So, like I said, I don't drive to work anymore, but I do every now and then take a break and go fishing. And so what's nice about the pandemic is that I can drive from Burbank to Malibu in 40 minutes, no matter what time of day.
Isn't that great?
And so I'll get up at 5 in the morning. I'll go to the beach. It's the sunrise. I go fishing. It's incredible. And I come home and it's 9:30, 10 o'clock, and I can do my day.
Start your day. Nice.
And I've already gone fishing for the day.
I argue that makes you a more efficient, better employee.
Oh yeah.
So I think it should stay that way.
I've got a. What gave me one of the things that there was a guy named Randy Sharp that I work with. I don't know if you guys know Randy.
Oh,
yeah. But he used to be at DD and he lived in Valencia, way out there. Mm-hmm. And so he would leave Valencia at 5 o'clock in the morning, and he would be in Venice at 6, and then he would fish, and then he'd come to work at and he'd be at work by 9 o'clock. And I was like, that's amazing. And I was I'm sitting there trying to get my coffee. He's like, I caught a leopard shark today.
Yeah.
I was like, wait, what? I just got my coffee. So yeah, I think that sometimes finding a little thing that can change your day, that can break the monotony, can do something interesting is nice. And then, that's a little bit tougher when you're at home, but you kind of have to find those little moments if you can. Sure.
Got to kind of make yourself to a degree, to the extent I'm very fortunate. People that are home with their children, like you are, homeschooling and learning right now. It can be when do you get that moment to take a break, to get up and walk away from your computer or their computers and get outside. So I think that's a key in the pandemic. Finding ways to have those moments of personal time is kind of the challenge that a lot of people are facing.
Yeah,
to help them cope and deal.
Yeah. Luckily, I like my family, but it can imagine if we're all we've been in the same house for a long time, and they were the only people. I was talking about it with someone. It's I haven't shaken someone's hand in a year.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's funny, every now and then someone will still start to work, and you're like, no, that's okay.
Yeah. I know. These are new habits we're gonna have to get used to. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, listen, guys, it was great catching up with you guys. I know that you.
So good to see you.
I know it's so good to see you. But besides the big company move and the big changes in your life, is there other projects that we can look forward to see your work? I think you mentioned Picard. You mentioned Westworld. What are some of the other cool projects coming up that we can check it out?
Well, Firefly Lane just dropped,
nice.
And we did a lot of work on that. And I'm trying to think of like what's in the pipe right now. We've been working on a large film project, which is interesting, but I don't think many people will get to see. It's actually a film being funded by the United Arab Emirates government. And it's sort of like their Black Hawk Down real story, military story.
Okay.
And it was really fun to work on because, I mean, just as, you know, most people are like, they used all their real military and all their real military explosives. So it's like,
nice.
yes, we have done dynamics to enhance and to add and stuff, but it's like, no, they let off that rocket. That really happened.
Yeah.
Boom. So that one's kind of fun. Looking forward to that one coming out. Bridgerton season 2 is already in the works, and we're looking at that one.
Nice.
And we're talking to some folks about some horror film projects, which could be fun, but they haven't landed yet, so you can't quite say.
Yeah.
But, you know, there's never a remake that doesn't need to be remade. That's all we're going to say.
Okay. Yeah.
Right.
Everything needs to be remade.
Yeah.
Paul, is there anything jump into the front of your mind?
Yeah, I mean, Snowfall season 4 starts this month.
Snowfall.
Yep.
That's right.
Nice.
Yeah. There's other things, and I'm completely blanking on them. So yeah.
I know. Well, when we've had a nice little, you know, just getting little pieces of like Tag Team, which is a Marvel film. You know, obviously they have big vendors, but we're getting to play a part in that. So
Nice.
you know, and getting our feet into that territory as well. So you know, it's good to have, and a little bit of maybe some other superhero CW shows. So. You know what I mean? So
Got it.
we're getting, because as much as we do the projects that are in-house with clients that we already have, you know, episodic clients that are like, we do work on Be Positive, again, like 3-camera, you know,
Yeah.
Station 19, you know, those kind of regular things. It's nice when we get the clients that are just come to for visual effects. Those are kind of, you know, we love to get a little bit different, like you say, add that potpourri, that flavor. So
That's
the
awesome.
superhero ones or the military ones or the sci-fi ones are often the funnest.
And the
And what we do in the shadows, it'll be another season.
Oh,
and,
nice.
And speaking of which, as
Yeah,
well,
that's fun.
Reservation Dogs, which is Taika Waititi's pilot. So yeah, that got greenlit. We
Nice.
worked on. We're the exclusive vendor on that one. So yeah.
That's a lot of
So we're
awesome
hoping for a
work.
busier second half.
Yeah. That's a lot of awesome work and a lot of things to look forward to. So I'm very much looking forward to that. So that's a big list. We will try to put them down. We'll try to think about that.
And we hope it grows.
Yeah, that's great. That's really exciting. That's really exciting. Well, thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Pleasure.
Yeah.
Love talking to you guys. It's great to reminisce. Great to see everybody together.